Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Artilist webinar series. My name is Sharice Ruan, Digital Marketing Manager at Artilist. Thank you for joining us for Securing Your Remote Workforce, Must-Haves to Do It Right, Part 2. Today, we welcome back Artilist Principal Cyber Engineer Seth Simmons and Microsoft's U.S. National Director of Modern Work and Security, Mr. Phil West, to continue the discussion on how you can build a more secure remote or hybrid work environment. Feel free to submit your questions during the webinar at any time, and they will be addressed during the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. Please note that if we do not get to your question during today's session, an Artilist representative will reach out to you to answer your question directly. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after today's session. If you have any question after today's webinar, please email marketing@artilist.com. Now I'd like to turn it over to Seth and Phil.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And welcome, or I should say welcome back to Securing Your Hybrid Workforce. I am Seth Simmons from Artilist, and last month in part one of the webinar, we covered that with the new reality of a distributed and hybrid setup of how we are all accessing data and resources, we need new principles to secure everyone and everything. We discussed building the foundation to zero trust. Drink if you're playing. And then we drove into how we can secure digital transformation by building zero trust foundations. Specifically, we covered modernizing identity and endpoint management, like migrating authentication and identities to single cloud identity solution. We also talked about securing hybrid workforce with securing remote devices, bring your own device, and applications. Through ways such as enforcing only compliant devices to have access, to using multi-factor authentication like Vital Keys or Microsoft Authenticator. Joining us again from Microsoft is Phil West, the U.S. National Director for Modern Work and Security. And we just had to turn this into a two-parter and ask Phil to come back because he and I got on a roll and we only got halfway through in the time that we had. Sometimes it's just hard to keep it short when you're really excited about the subject matter. So how are you, Phil?
I'm doing great. How are you, Seth? And by the way, Sharice, thank you so much for setting all this up.
I am doing very well. And again, a huge thank you for taking the time to join us again so we can finish kind of going through the journey that you had road mapped out for us. Picking up where we left off last time, I think we were just about to talk about transforming employee experiences. If you missed the first one, definitely go back and watch it, but after you watch this one.
Great, okay. Again, we did go very long on the first one, hoping to have more time this time, hopefully for questions, as Sharice mentioned. Last time we were talking, as we mentioned before, you can see the two bullets on the top here, the modernizing identities and endpoints and securing a hybrid workforce. And that's really something that's, you kind of view that from the central location, looking out at a hybrid workforce. Given what we're doing with the pandemic, we've got some offices, some customers' offices are kind of half open, certain locations are open. They may be doing some travel, maybe some restricting travel. There's no one size fits all. So one of the things that we're also worried about is, hey, what's the wear and tear on employees? So I try to draw the analogy of this about the majority of our workforce being hybrid. Not only has to do with productivity, but what happens when things don't work great? We're getting situations where we're also finding a lot of our remote workforce folks are like, hey, they're having to become like semi-IT people because they're having to learn how to do things sometimes on their own because they're not in an office, or they might be working on modified schedules. Who knows? What we're seeing is that remote workers and hybrid workers are having a lot longer period of time to actually get things fixed when they have issues. So we look at this in a couple of different ways. Number one, there's obviously a productivity loss there. And there's always going to be a productivity loss no matter whenever there's an issue, but especially when you feel like you're remote, you don't know exactly what to do. We have a situation where we want to provide employees with some really quick, easy, simple ways that they can do some self-service capabilities and kind of get themselves back up and running. We also want to try to help the employees and the remote folks be equipped so that when they do engage with IT, they have remote tools that help them with, okay, this is what we're going through, this is the situations we're seeing, as well as just making people, I mean, we're not gathering around the water cooler anymore. We in most cases, we don't have the you know, all those Friday birthday parties where somebody brings a cake in and everybody gets in the conference room and you have time to converse and get, you know, get collaboration kind of, you know, at a special time. What we're doing now is we're working longer hours in many cases. We usually have our nose pointed towards a screen most of the time. We're on camera some of the time, and we feel disconnected. So we got to figure out from that employee, what expense is this hybrid scenario having on an employee, and how does that mesh in with what we're doing around the security, so that we can make sure that that employee becomes as secure as possible, but still be productive, and they don't, you know, drive themselves crazy with IT problems and so forth.
So, and I think that giving the employees some tools so that they can already possibly start to try to solve it themselves, I think that's huge to me. I know a few times calling and talking to a help desk, like, yes, I have already turned it off and turned it on. Yes, I have already disconnected and I know your script. Yeah. That you're just reading through and telling me, okay, now try this, like giving that to the employees so that they can help themselves to a point, and then that may fix the issue right there, and the employee learns a little bit, but like they're able to solve it themselves. Exactly. Until it gets to a point that, like, okay, no, we really do actually need to call in some IT support, and they'll know that you've already done those types of things, which then makes the whole process go a little bit faster.
Exactly. So, you know, and Seth, one of the things we got feedback on is, you know, obviously in this world of hybrid work, remote work, you know, we had a scenario where a lot of folks actually had to get a device, and they weren't in the office when they got the device. They were already at home. They were working from home sometimes without an official device. And so there were situations where, hey, we're going to ship you this new device. And there's a 38-page instruction manual that comes with it that takes a rocket scientist to walk through it in some cases. And you know, if you don't hold your mouth exactly right on a full moon, things didn't always work out. So one of the things we're trying to do is a couple of these things. Is look, number one, a streamlined provisioning capability, which is everything from a brand new device, a brand new application, or a brand new way of working between teams, is trying to make sure we can streamline how we roll that out to our community. So a brand new device is a great example of, you know, that might be a happy day for some of our employees. It might be a sad day because they're like, uh-oh, I've got to connect this up, and how do I connect it to this? And wait a minute, is my email coming in, and do I have access to all the SharePoint sites that I had before? I mean, there's all kinds of issues, and all of a sudden you may have a set of workers where being remote just puts extra pressure on them. You've got tons of applications sitting out there that customers are using. So hey, by the way, you know, I want to be very open and honest. Everybody doesn't use everything from Microsoft, period. There are tons of vendors. So all of a sudden now we've got a situation where, hey, just because I can sign into my Microsoft 365 account, I might need to sign into, let's just say, Salesforce or Slack, or I might need to sign into another facility, like maybe it's a shared email system with some of our partners, or it could be anything. So one of the things we want to do is also, hey, how can we make it a lot simpler for the user to do a one-time setup to say, hey, this is my, and I'll use Slack as an example, you know, this is my Slack password, username, all the setup and so forth, and have that information saved so that next time we go to Slack, all that information is already pre-populated. We're already pre-signed in, and it's a single sign-in. Single sign-in means once I authenticate into my machine in the Microsoft directory, now I have the ability of reaching out to non-Microsoft parties those third parties and connecting with them and having that single sign-on capability. So we've done an extensive connections list inside of our Active Directory, Azure Active Directory Premium product that says, hey, I want to enable them for, and you go down the line, Salesforce, Slack, you pick and choose, imagine all of them, and then have that capability set up so a customer says, okay, you go out, you talk to your employees, and as far as the training, this is probably where you're going to provide a little bit of training and upkeep for them, because again, Microsoft's not going to know their Slack password or their Salesforce login information. So there's going to be a populating that information in. There might be a little bit of an up training to say this is what it looks like the first time you authenticate. Here's what it's going to look like the next time. So there's kind of overhead there. We want to make sure, again, we're reducing the amount of friction so that the customer, the employee, can be self-sustaining. That actually goes to that self-service experience. I mean, just giving the employee the ability to say, hey, I forgot my password. Okay, I need a new password. And again, Microsoft is trying to steer folks the direction away from passwords, but we do still have systems where people just want to have usernames, passwords, and in most situations, you lose your password, you need to reset it, whatever it might be. Just having that. I mean, I used to manage a help desk ages and ages ago, and password resets were like just the bane of our existence, because people would, people would call in, I forgot my password, and then you have to go in, you'd reset the password, you'd send them something that was some gibberish. They would have to go. So there was this whole process, and quite honestly, you've got people at the help desk that have better things to do. Also, there's kind of this ability now that all of a sudden you also have to be kind of a little bit more self-sustaining when it comes to the business. So not only self-serving your IT needs, but maybe self-serving your other things. Like, for example, you need to collaborate directly with your HR contact within the organization. Well, maybe you don't have that Friday meeting where the HR person comes into the team meeting and everybody's sitting in the conference room and they give you the latest and greatest on all the new benefits and all the new things that are coming out, and here's the process to sign up. And we all know that the fall tends to be the time you're signing up for next calendar year. Maybe all that has to become very virtual. And how do we make that easier for our employees? So again, this is not just about, hey, let's keep everything secure, but in the process of securing it, I need to make sure that the employee is productive and happy, and that they're not frazzled at administrative issues or IT issues. They can actually get their job done. So that's, I mean, I don't know, Seth, from your perspective, I don't know if customers are coming and saying, you know what, my remote workers are just frazzled. They're just, I mean, they're trying to work themselves silly in some cases. What can I do to kind of at least mitigate some of that pain?
So I haven't heard that from anyone coming to us yet, but I know for a fact that that's a reality when you can walk 10 feet from your bed to your office, or not even get out of bed. Like you are constantly on, like you are constantly reachable. There is no going home. You're home. Right. So it's then, employees being able to kind of identify that you still work-life balance, like because you can't go home, like it's also part of a making sure that you can disconnect from work when you need to, but it's also then that actually, this is exactly what I was going to say, is it's all part of making sure that everything starts going smoothly, that they know who to talk to, what needs to be done, starting like day one. When I started at Artilist, we were already kind of in the pandemic, and so I was that guy that got a laptop and you plug it in, and we now have like 2 hours of updates of all of these things that we have to get because it got shipped. So all of these updates posted while this was in shipping, and then okay, now you need to get connected to the tenant, and now you need to set up your email, and having that good that like at that point, look at your employee as a customer. How can we give you the best customer service so that you don't get that burnout? and then we bring you into the family of the company, and then you can continue to have that good experience.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, anytime you've got employees that are just starting, they're getting a new device, replacing device, this is one of those things that I mentioned before. This is like a crunch time. So just simply something of hey, Seth, your login is going to be Seth123 at company.com, whatever it might be. I get that information to you, and all of a sudden you get a new device, and it just says, hey, who are you? And you put Seth123 at company.com in. It authenticates you, and it just says, hey, I'm setting up everything for you. I'll set up your email for you. I'll get that installed correctly. We've got Bootstrap, obviously Office capabilities, but this configuring, as you said, connecting you to the tenant, getting you set up with your email, getting you set up with security services you've already got established by your IT administrator. Putting in like self-service type applications, maybe something from HR that's necessary to be there. Obviously, hey, there's the expense reporting application or whatever. You've got all of these specialized line of business apps, and then automatically enrolling the device, getting it set up so that all of a sudden that employee, but that customer gets a new device, and it's really kind of it can be a seamless process. This is something you can work with OEM providers as you order your hardware. This is something we can do called autopilot, which is basically, hey, we can help get things preset on the device. When it ships to you, you're going to log in as Seth123 at company.com, and that's going to be kind of that key to getting everything else set up. Now you're still going to have to get on your own Wi-Fi. We kind of know there's some things. It's going to discover if you've got a local printer. And so there's little things that we're never going to be able to do 100% with. But if we can get you up and running and started and productive, and then let Windows 10 or 11 take over for discovery of your network and getting you set up with your printers or whatever, that gets folks kind of on the move in a much quicker way. Same thing with like a single sign-on. I mentioned this before. So like popular SaaS applications, software as a service applications, anything that's an on-prem application, it could be something that you actually kind of say, hey, I'm running XYZ on-prem, whatever it might be. This is my expense application. Maybe that's something that's homegrown. Maybe you did use Power Platform to develop it or whatever it might be. This gets you the ability that you could actually go in and actually just have, as we kind of show here, kind of like a dashboard of, hey, here are the things I want to look at. I've got my Adobe Cloud, maybe I've got Google Workspace, maybe I'm on Salesforce or Box, or maybe I've got set up for things for DocuSign or Workday. I mean, again, all of these, by the way, competitors to Microsoft, but we know we're not the only game in town. We want to make sure that our customers have the easiest and the most secure way of doing this. So all of a sudden now, user doesn't have to go and figure out 27, keep track of 27 different things. They can have a single sign-on so that they authenticate once on the device to the Azure Active Directory, and we can actually go and mitigate that broker, that identity over to these third-party applications. We've got a whole list of these things. I think there's more than I can ever count. I can just put it that way. And that's part of what we call the Azure Active Directory Premium Marketplace for these single sign-ons. So you go and you grab these and say, okay, I want it to be Adobe Creative Cloud. So that might show up on everybody's menu choice of what they want to be able to log into. So it's really just a way of making sure that, hey, this really has nothing to do with Microsoft. This has everything to do with making the customer's employee, making them more productive, and then easing maybe even some of the pressure off of them. So this is one of those things that people are like, well, hey, that's great and wonderful, that's whiz bang. No, there's actually a method to the madness. We want to make sure that we're making it easy on those employees. And this is something we've had for a while, but it's become so important during this whole hybrid work, remote work scenario that we're going through.
And I mean, so combining that, the single sign-on, so that is less stuff that I have to remember long-term. I absolutely use that and password managers and just the less stuff that I have to try to remember, so that I can focus on the things that I actually want to focus on. But then combine that with MFA. So, and that is still not it's not a difficult thing. Like I go to log in, and then my Microsoft Authenticator is like, hey, this thing's trying to log on. Do you want to approve it or not? Or here's a code, or click the number 27 on your device, or plug in your FIDO key. Like all of those are, it takes an extra like 2 seconds, but then you've got the ease of your single sign-on coupled with the security of making sure that you are the person that is supposed to be logging on.
Exactly.
I heard Jen Easterly, the new director of CISA. I think she's been on the job for like 3 or 4 months now. 2 weeks ago, I heard her at a conference, and she was saying that if you are using multi-factor authentication, you are 99% less likely to have an intrusion because of the fact that that layer of security is validating that person that's trying to sign in actually is that person.
Absolutely. Because that really highlights something I think we talked about in the last session, which is the user identity has become like the gold standard for what hackers want to go after now. I mean, we still have ransomware where people want to hold you hostage for your data. We still have all that. But, rather than me trying to break into, let's say, Artilus network, if I can just figure out how I can get Seth's identity, I can masquerade as Seth. I can try to log in, assuming that I can try to log in as Seth. All of a sudden, if I just have Seth's information, username, password, I got the keys to the kingdom. And if Seth is one of the principal engineers, maybe I have the ability, if I can log in as Seth, I can jump over and try to grab the identity of an administrator. And if I can grab the identity of an administrator, now I can open up your directory. So all of a sudden now it's just a mechanism of saying, hey, Seth's walking around with keys that would let you get into for example, the Artilus network. We want to make sure that when Seth uses that key, that it's really Seth's finger on the key, and it's not just the key. So I tell people this: it's not just what you have, which is like a password, like a key, but it's also who you are and authenticating that you are the right person holding that key. That's really important. So multi-factor authentication is like step one. If we were to say anything out of any of this session, it's make sure you have a good MFA policy. Now, MFA can be used on login. It can be used when you actually have like you're going out to do a special application, like maybe it's payroll tracking. And for payroll tracking, maybe it goes to a third-party service, and you want them to MFA as well. So I mean, there's a number of ways to think about it. You can also conditionally do it, like, hey, Seth's on an Android device and a Starbucks Android device I've never seen before. Maybe he just bought it. I don't know. He's in a Starbucks. It's kind of an unusual situation here. Hey, before I let Seth log in, I'm just going to do a conditional MFA to say, hey, things don't look exactly right. Let me just be super safe. Let me do MFA again on this device just to make sure when Seth's trying to log into his email that it really, really, really is Seth. So those are the kind of the situations we want to make sure that we're having a situation where we can determine, number one, what is the risk? What's the behavior type? What's the location that Seth or Phil is sitting in? What kind of device are they on? If they're on a BYOD, a bring your own device, personal device, we're going to trust that less because we have less control over it. Unless it's been enrolled in Intune and it's already managed, in which case we already know about it. We already know that this is a well-known Phil West device. Phil carries an iPhone. It's a well-known device. It's already registered. So Phil gets access to more information than if Phil sits down at a hotel computer in a lobby and says, I just want to go to, I want to open my, office.com/email and log in and try to get my email. They're like, hey, we don't know who you are. We don't trust anything. So you can imagine it's not only who you are, it's what you've got, but it's what kind of device, where you're sitting, and what's the situation here. It's also, hey, if you're trying to get into a system that you've never got into before, maybe you're trying to jump into the finance systems or whatever it is, there might be a reason to even do conditional access based upon what kind of data you're going after. So all these things. Yeah.
I think we talked about that last time, was that so looking at all those things, kind of that holistic picture of who are you and what are you trying to do and where are you coming from? you know what? We'll give you sort of a conditional access to what you're trying to get to. Like, so no, you will not be able to copy anything. You will not be able to even edit anything, but you at least look enough like you that will at least give you the like, you can have view access to this.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No save, no print. No, yeah, exactly right. So it's kind of literally kind of for your eyes only sort of a situation. And that actually goes back also to the single sign-on. I didn't mention quite yet. You know, there are a lot of single sign. There are a lot of applications that adhere to a standard, which is kind of what we call the protection standard, which allows to say, hey, you know, if we're going to be using an application like this, obviously, if I have something in my email, I can set up a policy that says, hey, I can't copy out of my email and paste it into Twitter. Probably not a good thing. Now, there's
probably not.
There's tons of scenarios where, hey, we've got this benefit that's going on, we're raising money, and you want to tweet it out. Totally get that. Majority of the time, things that you're doing in your work, you probably don't need to be tweeting about them unless you're the social media manager. So imagine yourself where you also want to have a conditional policy that says, hey, not only am I going to ask you things and give you conditional access, I might just refuse access completely. Like, you can't copy from your email into whatever. You can't paste it into Facebook. You can't, I mean, all the kind of the scenarios we could get into with that. So all of a sudden now, we also want to say, hey, we realize, because our employees, our remote employees, this might be their only device, might be their only computer. Your organization might have a policy that says you can use this outside of work hours for personal use, blah, blah, blah. So we want to create a mechanism where an employee can take advantage of technology, if that's your policy, but do it in a very safe and secure way. And that's really what leads us into kind of the next session here, which is, how do I customize security for different types of users? And I'm going to draw an analogy of this. We have a ton of frontline workers. And when we say frontline workers, we kind of have the concept of like knowledge workers, information workers, folks that are in finance and marketing and planning and business development and doing all of these things. Obviously in a lot of cases, if you've got retail, if you've got manufacturing organizations, you might have other situations where you might have a user that needs access to certain levels of information, but it's not necessarily like part of their job. It might be an ancillary part of their job. I look at it this way. In the frontline worker space, you can imagine, like if you're a nurse, there's plenty of things that a nurse needs access to in terms of information. But a nurse's job is to do the medical stuff. And you can tell I'm well educated in medicine. They're doing the medical stuff. They're taking the blood pressures, or they're working with the other folks, taking the blood pressure, doing the vitals, administering the medicine, probably doing the lion's share of the work and just feeding things back into a doctor somewhere. Now, the situation there is, you think about what is their job. Technology is crucial to doing their job, but technology is not their job. Their job is not to put all their patients into a spreadsheet with their weight and height and calculate all their BMIs and do graphs. That's not their job.
I take the stuff and I fill it in on the form.
Yeah, exactly. So now all of a sudden, I've got workers who might not be buried in a device all day. I could have remote work. I have hybrid workers that do this all the time. I've got folks that are like, hey, we're doing like what we call field inspection workers, where they're out doing remote work. They're inspecting a home. They're doing health inspections, fire inspections, safety inspections. I mean, all kinds of electrical inspections, all kinds of stuff where their job is, I got to be out there. I got to be with a certain customer for a certain period of time. I got stuff I need to do, and I need to be able to plug this stuff into a device and get access. And I still need collaboration. But if you think about it, now all of a sudden I'm collaborating with an individual it's not like a Phil West, where if I'm sitting in front of my machine and you IM me or you bring up a video call and want to add me, I'm probably going to be available. These are the exact opposite, folks. They're probably not going to be available. So collaboration now becomes, hey, this is a remote worker. I'm trying to keep them secure, but I also want to keep it so that I make their life easy, or easier, maybe is a better way of saying it. I've often said this: flexibility can be the enemy of compliance. So all of a sudden I can make something super flexible and I can break all the rules for compliance just because I want to make it super flexible. Or I could go the exact opposite. I'm going to lock down everything and be totally compliant, and I lose all my flexibility. What we have to do is we have to make sure that all of our customers from Microsoft and Arliss, all the folks that we're dealing with, they understand there is a balance. And that balance is that risk posture that you have to make a determination on. So part of what you're doing is to say, hey, I want to make sure that that frontline worker, and I'm using this as an example, that frontline worker has all the tools they need to do their job, because they are, as I mentioned before, they are the protection for your brand. Whatever you're doing, if you're in retail, if you're manufacturing, you're in customer service, whatever it might be. It could be a law firm, it could be a doctor's office, tons of different ways. You've got a frontline individual that is probably dealing with customers, customer issues, either intake or customer service or whatever it is. They are your brand. They are probably the first and maybe the last person that they will see in an organization. We want to make sure that that experience is as good as it can be. And that means that sometimes technology can be a tool. We don't want it to be a hindrance. Last thing I want to do is, as we mentioned before, if we have a nurse in a nursing station, last thing I want to do is to make it so that it's so hard for them to key in whatever they need to key in. You've ever been in a hospital, man, I can barcode everything. I can pop it with that barcode reader. All of a sudden now I'm pre-populating as much as I can to minimize it. I get the amount of data I need, the fidelity of data that I need. It's all checked there. But I also don't have somebody having to hunt and peck on a keyboard. So we got to think about it in terms of how can we make life easier. And remember, flexibility. I don't want to go too far away from being compliant.
Well, and so like exactly what you're saying of like those the people that customers are interacting with, like that is the face of the brand.
Right.
That is what you associate with the experience. And then going back to social media, like most of the time people do not post about when they have a good experience with something. Like
exactly.
the amount of good experience posts versus bad experience posts. Yeah, like if you get bad service, people will, like, I have added an airline before because one of the flight crew was 20 minutes late because he was getting a pizza. And you get we apologize, and you don't get anything else from it, but still, like,
right.
You rarely do people like, I had such great customer service from such and such barista at my Starbucks, or this healthcare worker, or your grocery store. Anyone that, like, I mean, even at grocery stores, like there's technology and stuff on the back end that if you can make their lives easier,
right,
then they're not having to worry about that end of it. I just know I have to do this, and there's stuff that magic happens on the back end, but exactly. I do this and I can do my job, and that then gives me the ability to interact with the customers at least the way I'm supposed to.
Exactly. And that's why we use frontline worker as an example here, because if you think about it, their job is not to have their nose pressed to a screen all day long. Their job is to perform tasks and utilize technology in a beneficial way. I think
it's a thankless job.
Yeah, I think we've all been in situations where we've worked with our customers, or we've worked with their customers, our customers' customers, whatever they might be, and all of a sudden technology can get in the way. I've been to restaurants before where you sit down and the person comes over with, I guess it's a tablet, some iPad, a tablet, or whatever it is. And to order a meal, it seems like that person, it takes them 27 taps on the screen to get a cheeseburger and fries and whatever. I mean, it seems like it's an inordinate amount of work to try to quote unquote streamline this. So we have to be very clear that streamlining has an effect. That effect is make it easier on the employee, and then subsequently, whomever that employee is servicing, whether it be a citizen, whether it be a patient, whether it be a consumer, whatever it might be, that person gets a better experience because of this. And as we all know, I'm the paranoid guy, we do it all securely. We do it all in a way that says, hey, all the flexibility I'm putting out there, if I'm putting a tablet out there and I want to be able to make whatever I can do, or it's an ordering tablet, or maybe I look up inventory if I'm in a hardware store, whatever it might be, I got to make sure that device is secure, because I always got to figure out at some point in time, somebody's going to drop one, they're going to lose it, they're going to leave it here, it's going to get run over with a forklift or stolen. So now I got to worry about also, how do I protect the data that is sitting on there as well?
It's not paranoid if it's actually probably going to happen in the future,
Exactly.
or if it actually is happening.
Yeah.
You're just aware, not paranoid.
Yeah. I'm always the one that says, well, what if this happens? And yeah, there's a shot that it could happen, but I'm so confused sometimes as to how like clairvoyant I might be, because it's like, well, we need to make sure this, and this doesn't happen, because sure enough, it went somewhere in my past. I've run into a customer that had, this chain of effects, this perfect storm hit them. That's why the number two here is looking at those at our customers' identities, and understanding that identity-driven security is the number one key thing that we have to worry about for fraud. And that's why you'll hear panelists, you'll hear speakers say, securing your identity is like the most important thing you can ever do. MFA is like one of the crucial things. Microsoft has been very vocal in the last 6 months that we truly believe that passwords are a thing of the past. Passwords are too easily hacked. They're too easily forgotten. I mean, just face it. I know there's nobody listening to us that's ever put a password on a sticky note and put it on their monitor. I know that there's nobody out there. But
no, you stick it under the keyboard so that no one can see it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. Well, I know there's plenty of times where I've walked into a customer and actually seen, if I look at their desk and it's wide open, I'm not looking over their shoulder, it's wide open, I can see enough information on their desk to know here's what they're doing. I can
probably guess your password.
Yeah, I could. I see your daughter, I see her name, I see your dog, I see some information over there. All of a sudden, and again, I'm not saying don't have pictures in your office. I'm just saying, understand that people who want to steal your identity are really, really good at stealing your identity.
I saw someone post a meme that what was it? My password got hacked again. This is gonna be the 19th time I'm gonna have to change the name of my cat.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I had not seen that one before. That's a good one. That's kind of our situation we run into, is all of a sudden, social engineering becomes so critical. And all of a sudden now, if I'm not there in the office every day and I don't see the poster on the elevator that says protect your passwords and protect your identity, if I don't have those visual reminders that we can put in a physical building, all of a sudden I'm remote. So just like you said, I wake up, I get out of bed, I put my slippers on, I grab coffee, and I'm in front of my screen in 10 minutes. All of a sudden, I'm not thinking about this. If you're like me, I tend to start thinking about, wow, I've got to get this done, I got to get this done. We have so much piled on us, especially in this hybrid space, that it's natural for humans to take shortcuts or be lazy. So we want to help prevent that. There's a great movie, if you guys get a chance to go watch it. It's called Catch Me If You Can, and it's the ultimate story of social engineering, and it is so perfect, because I tell people there's so much of that movie that, although it's based on a true story, there's so much of that movie that if people just understood what people are asking for things today, you'd realize how much of this. And again, the whole idea of this, the right-hand side of the screen, is we want to protect our customers, Artlist and Microsoft customers, but we also want to protect their customers, their constituents, their patients, their citizens, whomever we're talking about here. We have to understand that. And fraud, I have a friend of mine she's a fraud investigator for a bank, and she's always pinging me with these wild questions, and all these wild scenarios of people who impersonate other people. They move money around. The whole deep faking of voices is becoming so prevalent now that all of a sudden you get a voicemail from, you think it's your boss, and your boss says, hey, we need, that deal we're doing with so-and-so in Canada, we need to wire the money, and I mean, all this seems kind of fanciful. It seems like a movie, but believe me, it's real, because I'm hearing of customers who got defrauded for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, just because somebody impersonated somebody. And again, we all think about it as a username and password or login or whatever. It's becoming so good now that it might just be a phone call. It used to be emails. Hey, this is Bob in finance. I need you to send me all the employees' social security numbers, whatever it might be.
This
And
is
so,
John from the IT help desk. Hey, can
yeah,
you give me the service ticket off of your? Oh, okay,
yeah,
you know what? I also can just to verify that you are who you say you are, even though I'm the one that called you. Can you give me your username,
yeah,
and we need to validate your password. Ah, that didn't
yeah,
work. Can you try again? Oh no,
yeah.
there it goes.
There we go. There we got it. Yeah, it is so. Again, your identity as a user of any product is so crucial. I keep telling people this, and I'm not down on social media. I'm just saying this. If you get a service for free, if somebody gives you a service for free,
They're getting
then
something out of it.
you are the product. So,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I'm not down on Facebook, but if you log into Facebook and you're doing stuff on Facebook, Facebook doesn't charge you a monthly charge, blah blah blah. Guess what? You are the product. They have taken you. Now they hopefully there's no identity leakage, but what they're doing is they are using your identity to profit somewhere else. Be very very careful with identities, and as we manage identities, one of the things we talk about, and I kind of mentioned this I think before, which is hey, having a device awareness for your security plan. So I understand, like I mentioned before, I carry an iPhone. People carry Androids. People carry all kinds of things. Having that device well known and well understood, having it in, basically has, we utilize Intune as our mobile device manager. So you can have either application management go on the device where we deliver applications that are maybe custom apps that you develop inside and you want to deliver those to your employees. Whether it be device managed, where not only do we load down the applications, but we also create a separate container where your data can be stored. So we have data that is quote unquote corporate, and then the other data is personal. Having that information and that capability is so important, as well as having things that are like shared devices. I mentioned frontline workers, but we also have devices that might be shared workers. So I think about this, police officers, fire departments, for example, they have shifts that come on and off. You might work 24 on, 24 off, or 12 and 12, whatever it is. But everybody may not have their own dedicated truck or their own dedicated car or their own dedicated anything sometimes. So we also have to manage shared devices. So now all of a sudden I've got multiple users using a device. So I want to make sure that I'm providing them, again, flexibility. Can't afford to buy, everybody their own, iPhone or whatever, their own tablet. Maybe I have to have a pool of those, but I need to make sure that I keep them individualized and secured, because guess what? Not every police officer might have the same access or privileges or work schedule or whatever it might be, access to information. You might have detectives, you might have we used to call them beat officers. I don't know what you call them now. They're law enforcement front lines. All of a sudden now you've got different personas. So we need to make sure that we're keeping all that intact. We can't just say, wait a minute, for the sake of security, we're going to erase all this flexibility. There is no flexibility. Everybody has their one device, and in fact, it's like the old, the old Get Smart. It's your briefcase, and it's handcuffed to your wrist, and it's never going to go away. We can't do that because that's not the world that we live in.
But
so we need to make sure that
but,
we're
but there's
being
never a situation where there's more employees than computers.
That's right. Seth, I've talked to so many customers. Now, number one, in case nobody knows, there's like getting brand new laptops. I mean, it's like really difficult sometimes to manage the order processing and so forth. So all of a sudden now, I got people saying, listen, I need to pull stuff out of mothballs and bring it back in and start using it again. So we've got challenges around that. But all of a
I mean,
sudden,
that in itself,
yeah.
so now you got an old computer that who knows what operating system's currently on there, like what
Exactly.
is it even capable of? Yeah.
And I warn customers, like, listen, be very, very careful when you have to compromise And again, I know from a business aspect, I'm not trying to tell them how to run their business, but be very careful when you start compromising, like, hey, let's just throw anything technology at this and hope and pray everything goes well, because that's the last thing we want to really do. And again, as I mentioned before, all this goes back into how do I protect our shared customers? How do we protect their revenue, their perception in the market, their reputation? So again, part of this is our capability of taking what we already do in Azure Active Directory, which is kind of that identity storehouse. It's that big warehouse of identity, has tons of information that we're able to do, but it also has a situation where we might want to have, from one of our customers, they might want to reach out to their constituents, again, patients, citizens, just retail customers, whatever they are. So we also have what we call our Azure B2C, which is basically business to consumer. We use consumer just as a generic word there. So it's how do I extend the capability so that, let's say, for example, you visit a doctor's office and you want to be able to log back in and see information inside of their system that pertains to your after visits and your prescriptions and all that kind of good stuff. We want to make sure that we're providing that capability as well. We also have other tools, like in our Dynamics portfolio. We have specific tools around fraud prevention and fraud protection, which is, let me look at what I do with, like, for example, look at what you're doing with your identity. Hey, you know what? Phil West has access to go to Redmond, go to building 33 and walk in the front door and go into the enterprise, our executive briefing center. I could do that. That's an authorized activity for me. Now, the fact that I live in North Carolina means that I'm only going to do that certain periods of time. I'm in North Carolina. In fact, you can see me log in with location-based services that I'm sitting somewhere in North Carolina. You can get pretty good at my location. But all of a sudden, you see me 2 o'clock in the morning badging in building 33 on the campus to go to the executive briefing center, and you're like, that's interesting. It's authorized. I mean, there's no red flag that says Phil can't do that. Phil is authorized to do that. His badge is set up to do that.
I mean, lightning struck your brain and you just had an idea where you had to fly all the way cross country to do that.
It's like, okay, that's a legitimate action, but it's kind of odd. Well, what happens if the next Sunday night it happens, or Sunday morning it happens at 2 o'clock, and then it happens every week? What happens if all of a sudden now we've got a situation where a legal action, an authorized action, can have a flagged repetition or frequency? You could come together with a scenario, an incident, if you will, that says, hey, this is just doesn't add up. There's a legal thing that's being done. It's an authorized thing that's happening, but the frequency or the location or whatever. So all of a sudden now we want to do the same sort of thing. And fraud protection has the ability of doing very similar situations, but not just with identity. It might be with transactions. It might be, something around expenses, something around procurement, anything like that. There's also this old story called the Easter egg story, which is basically how companies could actually get defrauded by pennies that were being transacted. So if a transaction went through a currency exchange and there was like a tenth of a cent left over, or 2/10 or 4/10 of a cent left over, you just round that up, because in the United States we don't have anything smaller than a penny.
It's Superman 4.
Yeah.
Or
So,
Office Space.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, Office Space is a good example. All of a sudden, I capture all those little tenths or hundredths of a penny. If I add that up over a period of time, so all of a sudden now, if I start looking at something that might not be caught in the normal scale of business, but when you do it 10,000 times, obviously it throws up a red flag. So this is what we want to make sure that we're providing companies with, things like this. There are things like, for example, we've all heard of maybe denial of service attacks. Microsoft actually went through a distributed denial of service attack on one of our customers. There was actually terabytes of transaction going across the internet, terabytes of packets that were trying to attack. And because of our distributed denial of service attack prevention, we were able to mitigate that and minimize the effect on the customer. It's been in the news here recently in early October. I say that to say this. There are situations where it may not be somebody trying to just impersonate you. It may not be somebody trying to just steal your data. It may be, how can I just take down your services, whatever it might be. You think of, you got a website, you run a website business, whatever it might be. How about if I attack that to the point where nobody can get to you, nobody can order anything, you can't process orders, maybe you can't even get out to the shipping folks to make updates. All of a sudden now I've frozen your business. And that's a cyber attack. So we start looking at this and say, okay, Phil, you guys are kind of all over the map with the security thing. Well, it might seem that way, but the problem is security is all over the map.
You got to be everywhere to do everything.
And guess what, Seth? You know this. All they have to do is all the hackers have to do is be right one time, and they win. They score something. They have a data breach. They do something.
But defenders have to defend every single possible way that they could get in.
We have to bat 1,000. We have to bat 1,000. So in the time that we're talking in the baseball playoffs, think of that as every time we step up to the plate, we have to knock it out. We have to have a hit. It is so much pressure on our customers, and they're looking for, hey, help me figure out, number one, how I do this, how I do it more flexibly, and how do I do it in a better way. And that's really where we come into kind of this zero trust model. And I mentioned this as zero trust. And people think immediately it's like, okay, that means I don't trust anybody anywhere ever. That's not exactly what it means. What it means is at the very top, you can see those three sentences there, or three phrases that are very important. Number one, verify explicitly. That goes back to things like multi-factor authentication. I want to know that if it's Seth123 at company.com, that it really is Seth that's logging in. It's Seth's telephone that's going to get a message, and Seth's going to have to read something on the screen and input it or select it or have a FIDO key or what. I mean, anything that would say, okay, yes, there's a multiple ways that I've authenticated. I didn't just get username and password. Using the least privileged access. So we often sometimes call this just-in-time access or just-in-time authentication. What that means is Phil logs in, and Phil logs in as just basic old vanilla user. And if Phil needs to do something very specialized, like perform some sort of administrative task on a server or whatever it might be, Phil at that moment in time gets a privileged escalation to do a function. Maybe there's a function set that it runs, maybe it's a period of time. It's all logged and audited. And at that point in time, when Phil's done, he exits back out and goes back down to his vanilla set of privileges. That allows us to have a very clean log of who did what were they doing, we can log all that, why were they doing it, and all kind of good stuff. I grew up programming on a Unix system, which meant you never logged in as root. You never logged in as the master administrator. You always logged in as a user. Yeah, you log in as a user, you super user up and perform a task and exit back down again. It's very much a similar way of doing that. It's I only get the level of access I need to perform the task I need, rather than somehow just walking around with all the keys of the kingdom and let's just assume everything is fine, and it obfuscates really what privileged access really should mean in a company. And finally, it's assuming the breach. I think we mentioned this briefly before. I tell customers this is not an if game, it's a when game. So the when game is basically said, okay, at some point in time we're going to have some sort of a breach. There's either going to be a phishing attack that's going to hit, and some user somewhere, maybe an executive is going to click on something, and who knows what's going to happen. Data is going to be sent unencrypted or whatever. Somebody didn't pay attention to the rules or whatever. You didn't have an automated system in place, so you tried to use something that was that maybe your user thought was okay. I think it's okay to use this, so I'm going to use it. Like I said, you can have users trapped at home, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, I've got to share this big presentation with this partner. I don't really know how to do it. Let me just go put something on one of the third-party sharing sites where I do file sharing, and I'll just send them a link to it. All of a sudden now I've got something kind of sitting in the wild that could be utilized. So as I mentioned before, there are those three phrases at the top where let's just assume something's going to happen and get prepared for it. Hey, if we're wrong, great. Hey, you know what? Nobody's going to kill us if they come back and say, "Wow, you did all this preparation and we never actually used it." The greatest thing that you'll ever walk in a building to see is a fire extinguisher that is absolutely full. That means it's not been used. So let's keep our fire extinguishers full. Let's don't have to put out any fires. And the way to do that is to prevent them. And at the bottom, we have the keys. Number one, visibility. We got to have the ability to look and see what people are doing, have the ability to, again, go through analytics. Analytics says, hey, take what's visible and turn it into some real data. Like, for example, Phil's badging in 3 a.m. in the morning. That's visibility. I want to make sure I've got the visibility to that. Analytics says, let me start looking at it to figure out what a pattern is. Hey, wait a minute, this is happening every Thursday night, every Sunday morning, whatever it is. It's happening 27 times, it's happening 30 times. And oh, by the way, Phil is also logging in from his machine at home. So we've got to log in from home, but we've got some sort of identity issue out here. How do we correlate the two together? And that leads us to automation, which is if I can provide our customers with the tools to take these levels of policies and all these guidelines we've said, and hey, let's try to automate that so that at some point in time, when one of our users sends out data outside the organization, it's automatically encrypted. User doesn't have to do anything. When a user is going to perform certain tasks or things that are happening in an organization, and we get a red flag through our analytics that says, hey, this looks a little fishy. We also have the ability to automate and say, okay, stop allowing this for a period of time. Stop allowing it anytime. Escalate this to a support engineer, whatever it might be. For example, don't let Phil badge in anymore at 3 a.m. On Sundays. No, he just doesn't. He doesn't have the ability of doing that. And guess what? If you're seeing this dichotomy of what's happening, and you cut off the suspicious behavior, and Phil never calls to complain, maybe you caught somebody and you didn't realize you caught them. So that's really the important point to this. As I mentioned before, just in summary, we kind of get caught up with kind of things we talked about before. I'm not going to go into this because, like I said, we covered a ton of this in our part one. But what I do want to mention here is as we move forward, we do have a couple things that customers might look at. One of the things that I would ask you to take a look at is what we call minutes matter. You can look at, there's an AKA link there from Microsoft, aka.ms, minutes matter. And it basically is just talking about the timeline between when a breach could happen and how you're able to react to it. And minutes matter. Hence the need for things like policies and capabilities that are put in place that can also trigger automation.
Speed of cyber.
The speed, yeah. Guess what? The bad guys are using everything they can to speed things up and automate it. We need to also take advantage of that as well.
Absolutely. Like they are using every single resource that they have available to hit their target. We need to assume that they are trying just as hard as we are.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I said, we've got about 1,000. And so, just for folks, if you're interested in this, Microsoft did a what we call our work lab. It was basically the hybrid work disruption that's happening. It's a trend report that we put together. It's great for market insights and market analysis. You can see the URL there, as well as a guide for business leaders on what hybrid work means to their business. So not just the trends that we're seeing, but what does it mean in terms of not only employee security and flexibility, collaboration, but just health and well-being as well. And that's our hybrid work link that you see on here as well. So Seth, I'll turn it over to you. I think we're right at time again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this, Phil. It was great.
Glad to be here.
Hopefully we can do another one of these in the future, maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah.
How about we don't ask me anything where we can get to more questions?
Or we pick a less broad topic.
Oh yeah, that's good.
So maybe a deep dive into one of these.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you pointed out, we used up all of our time again.
Thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar series of securing your remote workforce, must-haves to do it right. For those of you that sent in questions, we will be sure to get back to you. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. If there are any additional questions, you can email us at marketing@artilist.com. If you missed the first session, you can find it on our YouTube channel. Just search for Artilist and you will find our channel. Give these videos a like, subscribe to the channel. If you hit the notification bell, you will get notified when we upload a new video. We're actually going to be having a pretty exciting series of capability videos starting next week, the next few weeks. At least I think that they're pretty exciting for stuff that we've got going on. And if you're subscribed, then you won't miss them. And then finally, schedule your free consultation to start making your organization more secure through our website, artilist.com, and we'll get the ball rolling. Even if you feel like you aren't quite ready yet, we will meet you where you are and help get you started down the path of replacing uncertainty with understanding. Thank you for attending, and thank you again, Phil, for this. This was excellent.
Thank you.